This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Released on Sunday, July 26th, 2015.
This Agile Life, episode 91.
Version 1 spy.
Yeah, hi, I'm the version 1 spy.
The software industry transforms more and more every day. Agile methods are quickly replacing traditional ones. The question is, are you agile enough? This podcast is devoted to agile and lean software development. Time to welcome your agile coaches on This Agile Life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. My name is Jason Tice, the Agile Factor on Twitter, and joining me tonight, we're going to do an experiment, and that first part of this experiment is about allowing our hosts to introduce themselves. So if you happen to be a host out there and you are joining us for our experiment this evening on This Agile Life, could you please make your presence known?
Hi, this is Natalie, Aussie Natso on Twitter. Looking forward to the show tonight.
That's awesome. So, and again, tonight we're not going to tell anyone to do anything. So if there's anyone else who would like to make their presence known, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
What if I don't actually want to make my presence known? What if I want to just like lurk here and make nasty comments? Oh, by the way, I'm Lee.
And Lee, that is where I would ask you, are you a member of the team or are you not?
That's a good question.
Yes, because what if you have that person on your team who's lurking and not really involved? So what we're going to do tonight, we thought we would do an experiment. And I'll share, I just came an hour ago, I was at a Lean Coffee event held in St. Louis, Missouri by the Lean Kanban group that I help organize. And we have monthly Lean Coffee sessions that are open to the public where you can come and have lots of conversation about Agile and Kanban and Lean topics. And so what we thought we would do tonight is have a little bit of that Lean Coffee conversation through our podcast for the benefit of your enrichment as our listeners. So I have the actual Post-it notes from our real Lean Coffee session held at a Panera, and we're going to pull them here out in random order, and we're going to talk about them for about 4 minutes. For those of you that are not aware, Lean Coffee was created by Jim Benson. It's a technique that you can use in a retrospective or for any kind of meeting, really, where everyone sits down at the table, everyone brainstorms some topics or some questions, and then basically you create a backlog. It's a discussion backlog. And once that backlog is created, people vote, or there's a couple other ways to get it started. Just basically pick a topic and start talking about it. After a period of time, we're going to use 4 minutes tonight. The group would vote. Do we want to keep talking about that topic? Thumbs up. Or do we want to move on? Thumbs down. So that's Lean Coffee. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to do a lightning round. So we're going to talk about a topic for 4 minutes. After about 4 minutes, we're going to move on because we got lots of these. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I will pull from the topics at random. And the first one we have is, what is the most important metric for Kanban?
Okay, so first off, when you talk about metrics for Kanban, are you really wanting metrics for the flow, or are you wanting metrics for your team? Is it important to actually have appropriate metrics for your team versus exactly what the Kanban is giving you? I assume here they're really wanting something specifically about Kanban. So I would have to start with cycle time. That's the easiest and the best one for getting information out that I've seen.
Okay, cycle time. And Natalie.
I would absolutely agree, because I think to your point, Lee, about, what are you wanting it for? That probably gives you the most information for several things. Cycle time, as far as how quickly you can get the stories done, which also helps you plan for when you could get a particular thing out. And then the change in cycle time would also give you an indication of whether the team's getting more efficient and better as well. So it's the biggest bang for the buck.
Okay, so, and I will share, as shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who listened to episode 90, I agree wholeheartedly with that. So, but let's say, so you're tracking cycle time, and then if you're going to track another metric, so number 2, what would that be? and there's no ideas. So that's tough. And I know we talked last week that the version 1 list had some interesting insights, and noticed that we all said track cycle time, which was not number 1 on version 1's list.
I would guess, I mean, like it doesn't have to be specific around Kanban. The next one would be, code coverage or anything is around standard practices, because all of that still exists regardless of, what practice you're doing. So I wouldn't want to throw out all of those other things just because we're doing cycle time and that's the only metric we need.
So I think another good one that's specific to Kanban is time in a queue. So if you can somehow track how much time cards are spending in any one queue, then or one column, then that can show you where you've got some extra capacity or lack of capacity, or some other issues may come up. At least you can start asking some questions.
Well, and Lee, what you start to see there too is some elements of that. Well, number one, that would be fine-grained cycle time, so I can drill into it and see it at each state of my workflow. But then also you may see elements of that like in a flow diagram. So like, is there a point where there's a long-running job in your process where things pile up? So I think one other thing that we mentioned at the Lean group tonight, though, was, again, to keep your metrics simple. Lee, you should love this. So we just shouldn't measure for the sake of measurement. But what I'd say is, maybe beyond cycle time, unless you're working on a specific improvement, that's what should drive your metrics. So, hey, we want to improve this, so how are we going to measure it? And then you come up with a metric. And once you achieve that goal, you retire that metric except for your cycle time.
I was just going to add another one that may be useful is work in progress. That you may want to be tracking that, but that's more like a rule. But you could actually see some, if the team has come up with a predefined list of this is what we're limiting it to, but they may want to track that to see if there was, great the cycle time was improved when if they had a further reduced work in progress rule.
Okay. Well, let's see. Should we move on a little bit? Have we done this one enough? Maybe with our small podcast here tonight, we don't need to have 4 minutes. We'll try. We'll try another round. See if something gets going here. All right. So here's another one about metrics. What are metrics that you would track that are good leading indicators? I think we've already said cycle time is a good metric. Cycle time is a leading indicator. Anything else? So this would be a metric that would be indicative of saying that maybe something's going wrong, and we could be proactive about doing something about it. And this is when we all think for a minute, right?
I have a pet peeve on this one that I like to track, is tracking that teams are meeting their commitments, because that is something that if the team is constantly unrealistic about what they can achieve, it's just poor planning, and then it becomes demoralizing for the team because they're never actually meeting that commitment. So that's one that I like to track.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So how do you track that? Like, do you track that? What if I'm a team, I commit to get 12 stories done, that's my goal for the week, and then I end up actually getting 16 done? Do you...
Well, that leads into your planning is not effective, right? You're not accounting for how well you can, execute on those things. So I plan to what the team committed at the beginning of the iteration, and we'll track to that. And at the end of it, we evaluate it. It's usually, it's something that you can bring up in retrospectives. Just talk about, like we were on, great. We estimated well, where we were over. So maybe we need to bring in more stories the next sprint, or we were under, we need to reconsider our approach there.
Well, and I think the key thing, I appreciate you saying that, because I think that's something a lot of people might miss. It's, we say, did we make our commitment? And we tend to answer that question in a yes or no manner, and we only emphasize when we miss the commitment. Like, so we commit to 10, we only get 8 done. You're spot on with the exact behavior that I think sometimes gets missed, to say that, hey, we over-delivered, which is great, but that's a learning opportunity for next time, so we can, make a more realistic commitment. So I think that's awesome.
So I have a little issue with this too, which is that if we do that too much, then I'm afraid we end up in the same situation that people that get government funding get into, which is at the end of the year, they try to figure out how to spend all their money because they didn't spend it all because, oh my gosh, it's going to get taken away. Or I don't want to overcommit and to really try to hit my commitment mark exactly. So I'm going to overestimate what I think things are going to be, and this has been a classic thing, and for decades with software development, and I think this may perpetuate it.
You think the discussion would perpetuate it?
Not the discussion, the idea of having to the very idea that we have a set number that we're going to try to hit, right, over a given period of time, when we don't really know what may or may come up at that time. Because let's be honest, at the end of that week or 2 week iteration, whatever it is, and you look back on it, one iteration you'll get great, and
lean our high-tech lean coffee timer went off. So Lee, wrap it up. What were you saying?
Okay, so at one point you'll get the great, at one iteration you'll get a great group of stories, and you got them done ahead of time. And the next iteration you got these ones that were a little tougher than you expected, and you didn't. And you talk about it, and that's exactly what people will just say. Oh, these were really easy stories. We didn't know they were going to be easy. Oh, these were really hard stories. We didn't know they were going to be. Oh, we had this one story that really screwed us up. Okay, you've made excuses. What does that buy you?
Okay, well, guess what? It's time to move on. We talked about that topic, and so lean coffee. We're going to pull another topic from the deck, and we'll have another short conversation about it. So this topic should be interesting, and I think is a whole podcast. It says, how to transition from waterfall to agile.
You're screwed.
What?
Version 1 police.
What the?
The version 1 police are here.
Who
is that?
Whoa. I thought when we started, I said, who is here? Please introduce yourself. And there were only 2 other people. So
mystery guest.
So
John Sextro has arrived.
John Sextro. John, did you get a new job for version 1? Are you here to lay down the law?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Just kidding.
Okay, well, so John's here, and so John's going to join us for Lean Coffee, and I need to get the very high tech clock out, and so let's discuss if we're gonna give a 4-minute talk about to someone, how do we transition from waterfall to agile? What would you say, Natalie? Why don't you get us started?
Yeah, so because we've only got 4 minutes, I have to say what I think is the most important thing in an agile transformation, and that's leadership buy-in, senior leadership buy-in. Without that, it's just a struggle, and people will give up. If you don't have that high-level support and sponsorship, it often just is way too hard.
Okay.
So if you're going from from waterfall to agile, who would go from agile to waterfall? I think that whoever is supporting that groundswell needs to heavily work senior leadership before they even start.
So I would like to add to that what I found is don't necessarily go all in all at one time, unless you're ready for it, unless you've got some serious help. If you're trying to do this as on a team basis, or if you're trying to do this as in your company overall, expect it to take a while. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. Pick one change that you can make. I would suggest start with retrospectives, and go from there. Start figuring out what the next pieces are that you want to pull in, and change one thing at a time, and make sure you have those under your belt before you continue on to the next thing that you want to change.
And just one thing I'll say, not to go back to our discussion about the version 1 survey, I approach this idea of transitioning from waterfall to agile as a journey. So you're kind of like, it's not like there's a point where you ever get done, because there isn't like a common state of this is what agile is for everyone that's the same. It varies. So, Mystery Voice, do you have anything to say now that you're here?
Sure, I have some advice. I think you should use an agile and iterative approach to your agile adoption. So start small. Any improvements that you can make to your process, regardless of what it is, are a positive thing. So start to make some small incremental changes to your process and the way that you're doing things, and don't necessarily try and flip the organization on its head with something. Start small and work your way up from there. And I agree with Jason. Look at it as a journey. I also agree with Natalie. You need some leadership support. And I think Lee's advice of starting with retrospectives is a great way to get things started in the small.
Oh my gosh. The politician's here. He's like saying, everyone's right. Everyone's right.
I'll vote for John.
Oh,
John for president 2016.
Yep. So do you think there's any merit, and I'm just going to, as far as to doing a whole, like flipping it, just to feel all of the pain immediately and then working through that? Because, like that, if you look at it from a length of time it takes to make a significant change in a transformation is a lot of pain initially, maybe worth it to do going through your transformation rather than doing those small steps.
I would say I wouldn't suggest that for one reason. You can't tell what your pain points are if everything's a pain. If you're getting frustrated with it, and that's what I see with teams that try to do too much too quickly, is they get frustrated with it, and then they start abandoning stuff. They don't really believe in it anymore if they can't see change and helpful change. Instead, they end up with dropping it, and Agile was a failure because I tried to do too much too quickly.
Yeah, Natalie, I would question, why would we sign up for something that we know is going to be painful up front? There's the high scientific timer.
I just wanted to say, I was playing devil's advocate because we talked about the Agile buffet the other week, and that was definitely a similar kind of approach. So
yeah, so any last words before we go on for the 4-minute guidance on how to transition from waterfall to Agile? Don't bite off more than you can chew, maybe. That's a soundbite. Okay, so let's go on to another topic here, and this one is interesting. It's a tool topic. It says, how do you put your stories in, and it says in Jira, and the quote says epics and themes. So I think the question here was about user story breakdown. So what do we have to say about that?
So the first thing that I would ask there is, what exactly is the need for the story breakdown? And in some cases, I know exactly what they're going to get at, which is, well, we need these feature level stories because that's what the customer really thinks at, is features, not in individual technical stories or smaller chunks. So I know where they generally want to go with that, but how far should that hierarchy go? I've never seen it be necessary beyond a feature level. So feature breakdown into stories, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Interesting. Natalie, how about your experience with that? Because this is where I know traditional Scrum was, feature story, or actually was epic feature story task. What are you seeing these days?
So I would encourage people to forget about the tool, maybe go to something a little bit more hands-on, use some index cards, organize how it makes sense to the team to see the work, and then think about how they can put that into the tool and not let the tool dictate how they're going to organize their work.
There's an old axiom from the best practices for object-oriented development. One of the principles, and it's the package principle. And I think it says something like the unit of release should be the unit of reuse. So think, whatever you're releasing, those are the things that you should be able to reuse. Something to that effect. I'm sure if I get it wrong, somebody can correct me on the internet and say I'm wrong on the internet, but
that would never happen, John. No one on the internet would tell you you're wrong.
No, of course not.
No, Renee Trouton will contact you on Twitter and say, "What white paper was that?" I got it, Renee. I gotta go, Renee. I know where it is. I'll send it to you. I promise. So, but I think.
So my point is,
what's your analogy, John?
My point is that what you want to release should be, I think, the highest level that you organize at. So if you want to release MMFs, if you're focused on releasing minimal marketable features, then use that. If you're doing something else, if you need to categorize things in some other way for the purpose of releasing, do that. But just do the minimum that's required to make sense for your project and for your team and for your product owners, so that everybody understands what's going on, and nothing more. Don't try to get fancy and use aspects of a tool just because they're there, because all that's going to do is make things more difficult to understand. And I would also encourage people to use a just-in-time approach for putting story information into a system, because you get a lot of story and feature rot if you just have people banging stories in there all the time. Wait until the last responsible moment to get all that stuff into the tool.
Really? See, John, actually, I would say something the exact opposite. I would say...
You're wrong.
Well, I would say use the tool if you have a tool, and again, pros and cons of tools, but use it as much as possible, because you can actually measure. Like, I'm amazed at teams that like, well, here's our coarse-grained backlog in Excel, and when stuff's ready, then we take it and we import it into Jira. Then we actually break things. I was like, if you have a list, put it in the tool, because then you could actually you could do reports to say, show me all the things that have been in my backlog that I haven't touched in the last 6 months. And then, as Natalie would say, delete them because they don't matter. So
yeah, so here's the trick. Never put them in. Then you don't have to run the report. Then you don't have to delete them. So my way is better.
Well,
Saved by the bell.
I was going to say, I bet there's an MBA in their corner office somewhere making a spreadsheet, John. And all I want to say is I want to shut that MBA down, because you hate those people, and say, make it where the team can see what they're up to, because they're using this. They're all on the same page.
Well, we do have the voting system. Should we want to talk about this for another 4 minutes?
Should we vote for? So who wants to keep going on this this topic about story breakdown? Okay, some of us are.
We're all thumbs down.
Not respecting us. Okay, so now I will pick the next topic on the poll. This one is an interesting one. I think we'll have a few things to say. It says, is it possible for one team to be agile and work with a non-agile team?
Not without ridiculing the non-agile team.
And without being ridiculed in return.
Okay.
For being cowboys and for being for having no process.
Well, but I think the core here is, this is like the classic, reminds me, John, of that episode you and Craig and Amos did about building infrastructure with agile practices. It's like, what if the nature of your work, because it's not as flexible as software, you simply can't retool and release every week. So suppose I'm working with a team that builds firmware for for an IC chipset, and they do 4 releases a year. Yet I'm trying to build software on top of that chipset that I want to use iterative development. What is the guidance we could offer to align to that?
So we have a couple of teams that are actually doing this right now within our organization that are working with the mothership, and there's a need to do that. They are still traditional waterfall and have deliverables on certain dates, and so what they have, their approach has been, is providing a person on the team to be a buffer to sort of filter out the noise, as far as, because they not attending the weekly status meetings for the whole team, and filtering in when the work is truly needed. So they're still acting in a very agile way, doing just-in-time work, and keeping the more traditional waterfall teams at bay with communication and attendance at those meetings, but not fully interrupting the whole team.
I have an idea as well, Jason. I've done this before, and I've also seen other teams do this before as well, where you, because you can't have the same sort of relationship that you can with maybe another agile team. You can't get alignment, you can't get reaction, you can't get quick change quick reaction to change from a waterfall team. I'm assuming, right? Because they're in the analysis phase right now, and they're not going to be in the development phase for another few weeks or whatever. And I need something right now. So I would look at that group as a dependency, or as an externalized dependency, just as I might look at my my runtime environment as a dependency, or something else where it's, I need to have some sort of a stable interface to whatever that is, even if it's like a person that you're interfacing with. But look at them as a dependency that you're not going to be able to change, and then you have to look at it as a constraint as well, and then you have to work around that constraint. So you have to say, this is a constraint that we have, and elevate that constraint so that it's clear to everybody, and then just work towards trying to deal with that as a constraint.
One recent story that I heard from a team that I'm working with right now is one of their external dependencies. It's another team within the same company, but their story estimates were in the hundreds of hours size. And this is a team they had to work with and had to get something out of, and they're having some frustrations around it.
Yeah, and the thing I was going to throw out there that I know some teams do, because again, like suppose you're building a product that consumes, data or functionality from something like an API that changes slowly because it's based on a mainframe or whatever. The whole idea of, fake it before you make it. Oh, the time is up. So I was going to say, because you can fake it, but then you run the risk of, what do you do if they never finish, if they fall further behind, because you probably can't release with the fake stuff. So, all right. Should we vote? Moving
sure.
on. Let's vote. Moving on. Okay. 3 down. Lee was impartial, so we're going to move on. Interesting topic, though. So I think the way I'd say is there are ways to make it work. So next one was controversial when we talked about this at Lean Kanban St. Louis. It says, when do stories count as work in progress?
When you're working on them.
Okay.
So
what was that?
Is there some context?
That was this was a question that someone threw in late. I was the facility, so that's my lovely handwriting if you recognize it. But they said, when, I guess for the purpose of like a flow diagram, when does it count as your work in progress? And to me, this was we had an interesting conversation because this was symptomatic of people who want to do work off the board, like secret work that's like not like their own work, or it's not the team's work. And I would say my statement that I shared with the group at Lean Kanban St. Louis was, if a story exists, it is technically on the board, and if it's not done, it's part of your work in progress. You may not be actively working on it, but every item you choose to put on your board, there is a carrying cost. So again, this is if you have a backlog with 1,000 items in it, you have a cost for every item in that backlog. I want every queue on your board to have a WIP limit, including the backlog, so that you can't have these long lists that are expensive to maintain and wasteful.
Do you think that they're asking about WIP in context of cycle time? So when does cycle time start counting? So whether it's sitting in ready and then gets to complete, that's when it, like it's from the minute it's ready to work or is it when somebody actually picks it up and says they're working on it?
Well, and again, as you commit, at the Kanban group, we talked a lot about cycle time because obviously we have your true runtime, which is the amount of time that you're actually working on the work item when it's on the board through its life cycle, versus the amount of wait time, which is important, Natalie, and I think that was part of this.
It's still considered work in progress, even if it's sitting in a wait queue.
Yes. So, and to me, I love, because that's how you measure efficiency, to say, how much time did I actually work on this story to get it done, versus how much time did it wait around in various states between when I pulled it to get it started and when it actually got it done. And
so I think we should distinguish between a WIP limit for columns on your board and when you start and stop the timer that you're counting for cycle time.
Yeah.
Because I would be all for a WIP limit on the backlog column and the dev ready column or whatever, but I would not want to count those columns into my calculation for cycle time.
Well, I would say my simple advice, John, would be to say when someone on the team pulls the card to start the first step of actually working on it, that's when you start the cycle time clock.
I agree.
Now,
I agree.
Okay, but interesting though. I know Natalie loves to talk about get Kanban, Joe Barnes, not get Kanban. I was wrong. So get Kanban. In Russ Healy's game, he does it kind of like the way Lean recommends, where when you add the card to the board, that's when you commit to it. And at that point, the second it's on the board, even if you haven't started it, it's in that ready queue, you start the cycle time, or you start calculating cycle time.
And I could go either way on that particular one, as long as you have some consistency in how you're doing this overall. I'm okay with putting starting the cycle time counter when you go to dev ready, or when you go to ready to be worked, but you need to be consistent with that.
Yeah,
and understand the repercussions.
Well, and also, just to be fair, it's like there's cycle time, there's efficiency we talked about, there's also lead time, which many times gets confused with cycle time. So, clock went off. Have a conversation about it. Make sure everyone's on the same page.
I want to add one other thing.
Okay, let's vote. Okay, we'll keep going.
Well,
I was just going to say I like that the alarm goes off when Jason's talking.
Always.
So I wanted to add something about the pronunciation of get Kanban, because where I'm from, get is a 2-syllable word. It's get.
Get up. Get up.
Get
Kanban.
Flow thing.
Well, I'm concerned that Joe actually may have got it confused because of my accent. It could have sounded like get Kanban when I said it.
No, it was me. I flubbed it. I did flub it. So
get over it.
Hashtag know your audience. So okay, so I think we finished this one. I think the best thing here, make sure something that I think teams need to do, invest time that makes sure everyone understands what your metrics are, especially if Lee's on your team. Okay.
Just before you go on to the next one, that really wasn't about metrics.
Well, it was about WIP. WIP is...
I know.
Do you consider WIP a metric? You can count it.
But WIP has a constraint. If it's limiting WIP.
Interesting. Okay. But we talked about metric. Natalie talked about cycle time. So cycle time, we'll give it a new name.
I brought it up, so it's
all
my
her
fault.
Okay, moving on.
All your fault.
Oh, gosh. Here we go. Is it important to estimate or make work items the same size? And I will share, Natalie, that this card comes from someone we all know who I think is okay we talk about him. Brian Budden in St. Louis, he's also involved with the Agile Lines. He threw this in there because he wanted to hear what I would say about it, so which you guys can all guess. But what do we think about it?
Can you repeat the question?
Is it important to estimate or make work items all the same size?
Could you use it in a sentence, please?
Well, I'm confused about the or.
By estimate, do you mean guess?
Here's the card. We'll look at the video. It says, is it important to estimate or make work items the same size?
Well, those are two different things.
Okay, so let's talk to our colleague, Mr. Brian Budden, and we'll talk about that. So, John,
well, if you're saying is it important to estimate, you could argue that, and then there's another argument that we could have around: is it important that stories all be the same size?
And there's even an argument about saying, should we try to make stories the same size and not bother with estimating, or should we always estimate and not try to make the stories the same size? So you could interpret that question in any one of those 4 ways.
Yeah, I would say when you're getting started, it might be a good idea. I think it's probably a good idea when you're getting started as a team to figure out some sort of a nomenclature and have some sort of a shared understanding about units in regard to your estimating process, using a relative tool such as a story point to create some context and to give you an opportunity to collect a metric for Jason's sake, so that some MBA in an office with a spreadsheet can bean count or whatever, right?
I'm going to
say, I've missed you, John.
Time out. So your investors can manage the risk of their investment that's funding your software development. Whatever, John. Okay.
You're right, Jason, of course.
What do you manage risk?
It's so that somebody can make money on stock. But ultimately, you want to establish some sort of a baseline, and then I think the ultimate goal is to narrow in on a very small range of relative numbers. So whatever that range is, it doesn't matter. But coming up to, if you can ideally get down to the point where all of your stories are, very close to being estimated the same, then you've achieved another level within the game of estimation, where you've arrived at a point where you no longer really need to estimate, because everything you're doing is working out to be, like within a standard deviation of each other or something.
Yeah, well, and the thing just to mention too that Natalie said last time, I called Natalie, can talk about this a little bit more, is how you even said you've observed a pattern I've observed multiple times, including with a team that Lee was on. Naturally, once teams kind of get the rhythm, they get into the their development process, all the stories end up being about the same. Just happens.
Yeah.
And so that's where, in short, my answer to that question would be yes. It's important to do both, based on the maturity and of the team that is actually working them. There is value in doing both, but you have to be aware of how the team is currently interacting. And at any time that can change, you introduce some new team members or a new direction of work or new work that they haven't touched before. That starts all over again. It's a new common ground that they need to find.
I would add that I would encourage teams to rather than having a estimation planning meeting. I'll finish that statement. Rather than having the estimation planning meeting, have a story breakdown meeting. You still get to talk and communicate about the stories and to try to make them all the same size. And that's a good way to start. If you want to throw in estimation at the end of that, fine, but you don't have to.
Okay. All right. Now this is the part of, okay, so we're voting thumbs down. Okay. So this is the part of Lean Coffee now where if you're following Jim Benson's, we should say, hey guys, how's it going? How's our lean? Is it like, are we having good conversation here?
I need a refill on my coffee.
Oh, I don't have any. I got some water. So
you're not allowed to have coffee.
Amos would have beer. So all right, we'll keep it going. So we got a few more here. So here's an interesting one, and I think this could be interesting because this is a real life thing that many organizations unfortunately still do. It says requirements gathering. When should this be done?
At the beginning of your waterfall.
Well, so John,
what the hell are you talking about?
I'm not making this up.
So
okay,
let's rephrase the question. Requirements. It's like whenever you mention requirements, suddenly people that are used to doing Agile get little ticks in their foreheads, and it really means figuring out what we're gonna do in the next period, whether that's a 1 week, 2 week, whatever. Figuring out what the features are that we want to get done, that kind of stuff. Basically, what it's saying is, when should we plan? I think that's what the real question is.
To me, requirements gathering is more akin to acceptance criteria. It's something that it's at the time you've pulled in this story, and the requirements for acceptance are the requirements that you used to think of, and rather than doing it for all of the stories in the backlog, you just get the requirements for the stories that you're working on.
Well, see, I think that requirements, at least in the old way, were basically what do I want my software to do, right? That's to me what a requirement is, and that comes way before we figure out what the stories are.
Well, and the thing I just want to say we talked about this card, and this is a pattern that I know many of our listeners may say they may see this. And if you see this, tell us about it, because this is an interesting problem where the business, does effectively, they design the application to get project funding to engage with IT. They need to submit a document, effectively a business case or a big use case document or something, and we're all shaking our heads. And then the business sponsor says, boom, rubber stamps it, we'll do that. And then say, okay, now let's go do Scrum, let's go do sprints based upon that big document. So if you're in an organization, like I think a few of our listeners probably are, where that's their reality, what guidance can we offer?
Get out.
Okay.
Can I play forensic psychologist for just a second?
Sure, go for it.
Lee, can I be anointed a forensic psychologist for a second?
Sure, doctor.
Thank you, doctor. So I think the root of this question is really someone has some pent up anger about the fact that there's no room for requirements anymore in an agile process. This probably came from one of those BAs that I tried to fire, where they're like, well, there's no time anymore to gather requirements. And I think the asking of this question completely and entirely misses the point, because we are always and forever gathering requirements. Every time we sit down and we look at the software with the users, we gather requirements. We call it feedback. Every time we push out a new beta to our users and collect feedback from them, we are gathering requirements. So we're gathering requirements constantly, and that's the real answer is we are constantly gathering requirements, and we are adapting to change, and that's why we use agility. That's why we use agile practices, is so that we can constantly adapt to change. If you think that you can gather requirements one time and be done with gathering requirements, you're wrong. That's what we tried to do for the first 30 years of software development in the world, and it didn't really work very well.
Do you think that some of it is that that we are gathering requirements, but that doesn't necessarily mean we take all of those requirements. We reject some of them. And maybe that's where sort of BAs have in some cases been traditionally in control of all that the software development team must do by providing this huge document, and it may be a loss of power. I
think we definitely gather a lot of things, right? We go out and we gather, but then we bring it back and we, I don't know what you would call it, but you sift through that gathering and you decide what you need to do and what you're not going to do. And I mean, I think there's something deeper in there around the loss of power that BAs feel, certainly.
Well, and since we voted to extend this topic, the one thing I wanted to add is, and I think about Amos sometimes when I think about this, is that, like John, I really like what you said, that we are discovering requirements all the time, and that's true. But I think it's interesting some of the tactics we use to go about that, because this is where maybe one of those BAs you were talking about, wants to sit down and make a big document with all of them in it. What I would encourage them to do, and I think we spend too much time planning, and what I wish we would do as a community is, instead of planning, let's spend some more time testing. And in particular for some of the roles on an Agile team, like a BA, that are maybe a little, they tend to be very focused on requirements and planning. Let's get them more involved in test activities. So if you look at what they spend their time doing, I would say maybe a dream is a majority of their time, like 2/3, is spent doing real testing of the software to learn. And so they write better requirements and stories for the team.
I can get behind that and support that. I would actually suggest that if you do have someone who has a function that is related to analysis in some way, that they can do both business and quality assurance work, and that should be in that job description. I don't think you need single those to be single roles or full-time roles, if you will.
I'll share, John. I want to try to somewhere do a measurement project where I try to get some data about the team's investment of total time worked between writing stories and planning and all that stuff versus the total time they spend testing. And I bet if we were to look at like a distribution curve of that time allocation, I bet it is so far skewed to all we do is plan, and write stories. And I'm like we had the conversation a few weeks ago, your planning should be time boxed. Hey, we're going to get together and groom our backlog 2 hours every week or write stories or whatever. And then guess what? We're done. We only come back and write more stories if we run out. Other than that, everyone's coding, everyone's testing, everyone's like playing with the app to get feedback and learn. And that's what it should be. So
I think we should have a future discussion on This Agile Life to talk more about exactly what we mean by testing on Agile teams, because I think that there's a difference between testing from the perspective of a waterfall project and what you might have formerly called quality assurance, and the sort of testing that you would do as part of an Agile project.
Yeah, we should probably like walk the test pyramid thing that Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin have. So
I don't know who those people are, but that sounds great.
Okay. They have a beautiful picture.
Of course.
Anyway.
They're probably consultants, right? They get paid for pictures. And the more beautiful, the more dollars.
Lee wants to say something, but he's living conference call in real life. He's on mute.
Yeah. So I think John has a great picture.
Thanks.
Have you seen his headshot?
Thanks, Lee.
I don't know. I still think John...
I'll send out autographed headshots if anybody wants any.
John looks like Casey from Casey and the Sunshine Band. That's all I can say. Okay, this topic's dead. We're waffling. Okay, maybe we'll do a few more of these here. We'll see how we're doing here. So
waffles.
Waffle House. Okay, so the timer's gonna go off. Crap. I have my timer app here. We figured the timer app is like causing interference. So
how many more can we do?
I think we do maybe 3 more. How about that? 3 more.
Okay.
So is management the real problem? And if so, what can we, meaning like the team members, do?
Well, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
It's real life.
I think they already know what the answer is. They're wanting, or at least they think they know what the answer is, and they're wanting corroboration.
Did Brian Button write that one too?
He is the management. What are you talking about?
It looks very similar to that handwriting.
We should not shame anyone for their question asking.
I am just kidding. Absolutely.
Okay.
But I mean, management can sometimes be the problem. Absolutely.
I think it can also be the excuse.
What is the problem? What problem? What problem?
The problem in general, I think. I interpret that to mean the problem that they can't actually transform to an Agile organization.
And or I think if you say from the team level, this is where management is failing to give the team autonomy to enable self-management in organization.
Well, that is a problem that management could be exacerbating. But I think it's unfair to blindly say, and this is coming from the guy that wants to fire MBAs and BAs and all that sort of stuff. You want
to fire the management, John.
No. I think it's unfair to just patently say that management is the problem. I don't know what problem it is. Let's skip that. This is a bad question.
Oh,
I downvote it.
Let's send it back to the product owner for a better story.
It does not meet the entrance criteria to this discussion.
I have lots more. Okay, well then fine. Here's another one. Okay, we'll reset the clock. So sorry if you asked us that question. How close are you?
I'm not sorry.
So real life, how close are all of us to a real pull system? And so a pull system, just to clarify for our listeners, would be a system where we do not agree to take on more work until we have sufficient capacity to do so. So and
again, who's the us in that?
I would say is any of us working in an environment where we have a pull system implemented, a true pull system?
I'd say that in general, from a software perspective, you can come up with what would be considered a pure pull system. It may not be as efficient as one that is not pure pull, because you're not building automobiles. You're not machining widgets on some sort of a thing from raw materials. And there's more thought that needs to go into the creation of some of the what we can call raw materials for the purpose of creating software. And you're coming up with what is essentially a new sort of feature, which could be equated to a new product every time, right? So there's some thought work that goes up front into figuring out what needs to be on the board, and therefore you can't just completely drain your basket, drain your work basket every time. You've got to be thinking to start pre-populating it. Go ahead, Lee.
So I have to challenge you guys on something, because I think there is a way to get to a truly pure system here, but it involves not just being able to pull from what's on the board and what's been stuck in the to-do column, because that's easy. I've seen that done on multiple occasions where you can get to a pure pull up to that point. But I think you could actually go further. I think you could actually have a pull system for the to-do as well, which is straight from what we were talking about before, as far as always having requirements, right? And being able to look at our immediate feedback, and what if the people doing the coding were also the ones that were picking out the things that they thought were the coolest things to do. And actually, my pick for today, which we'll get to later, kind of gets at this at a place to do this. I know this doesn't always work in a business setting, but it can work.
I just wanted to add, we've had some teams that have been able to achieve this. My warning here is it takes a lot of discipline to make sure that you've got work that is ready to do, in addition to like having a true pull system. So it's a mature team that is disciplined that could actually attempt this. So there's a lot of steps that you have to get through to actually be able to do that, because what is the killer is making sure that there is work in the wings ready to come in once they've completed the work that is ready.
Jason, what do you think? Can software teams achieve a pure pull based system?
Yes, totally. But my question for you guys is, I think though, as Lee said, it does happen. I think in a lot of environments, so there's a lot of tendency to push, like assign work to people. Say this has to get done this sprint, whether or the world ends. That which is a pushing the work. Can you manage? Is there any way to manage some push and some pull, or is it like one or the other?
I don't know. I want it to be. I would rather have it be just pull and not any push. I think in reality, sometimes some push sneaks in, but I think that it's kind of a thing that we're constantly fighting against, like gravity.
Yeah.
We're constantly fighting against gravity in this world, and we're constantly fighting against people wanting to push work onto us.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to say is just real life, like me to help a team, if they want to try pull, they should commit to pull. And maybe if they have where the management feels they have to push work sometimes, give management a few gold cards every week or something. So, okay, timer went off. What do we do? Vote. Who else talks?
I'd like to hear what Lee had to say.
Okay, Lee, we'll give you the last word.
Oh, I feel so honored. So I think you can get it if you provide boundaries for what business can provide. So if they can only push to the to-do column, and they can't tell you, and they can provide priorities, which ones to put at the top of the list, but they can't necessarily stop you in the middle or push things into the middle of your workload, then I think it could work.
Okay, so we got time for one more. I'm going to let you guys choose. So as I have been pulling my favorites out of this pile, and we didn't have a chance to discuss either of these. So the first one says, do all developers participate in estimation meetings weekly, or only the tech leads? And the other one just says, self-organizing teams Question mark, question mark, question mark. Let's ask our special spy from version 1. Which one would you like to discuss, sir?
Yes, I'm the special spy from version 1. I'd like to discuss self-organizing teams, please.
Okay, you may discuss that, spy from version 1. Begin our conversation for 4 minutes.
Self-organizing teams. Yay, they're great. I love them. Do that.
Hi,
do that. Self-organize.
I'm in middle management. Fine. What do I do? What's my job, John?
Go be in middle management at Schnucks.
Where, at IT?
I mean, knowledge workers don't need supervisors. Now, if you're a middle manager, what your focus should be is clearing roadblocks for teams. You should be focused on providing appropriate reward systems that incentivize teams and not individuals. And you should be focused on helping people improve in their journey, in their craftsmanship journey in software, and providing them enrichment opportunities.
Oh my goodness, more conference call to real life. Natalie's on mute again.
I think I muted myself when I was about to talk. So this is something that John and I had actually worked on a little while ago when we were looking at our teams to see what sort of level of, where would we put them in a self-organization scale. And we looked at different characteristics of teams to see, like what are those characteristics that teams or behaviors that teams would have if they were on the path to self-organizing. Because it's not just middle management, right? It's that the team, the core team has the skill set to be able to do all of the things that they need to. And some key things that we saw was a clear vision, and that's where the product owner comes in. If there's there was definitely a pattern that we saw with that when there wasn't a clear vision, the team was like screwed on all counts because they weren't clear on what they needed to work on. Having at least a couple of facilitators on the team that could help facilitate discussions, because developers can be introverts at times, and sometimes it takes some skill to get them out and to speak their piece. There was accountability, keeping each other accountable. They had good communication skills. They were efficient at planning. There's a host of other sort of skills that we had listed that we were looking at teams to see, were they exhibiting those skills or behaviors?
Yeah, and one thing I think I mentioned at the Lean Coffee that I'll just throw out there that has been wildly successful, I think. So if you're struggling with what is the challenges with management, try blocker clustering. So make sure that as a team, when you identify a blocker that's outside the control of your team, make it transparent and then direct leadership's or management's focus to it and say, hey, management, we need you to help us with this. And almost kind of set that up and direct them over there and say, that's your job, and hopefully we don't have any impediments, but if we do, and more than likely you will, help us out because we need to stay focused on our stories and our work.
Yeah, but also don't make the teams track you down, and be part of the experience of the team. Be around, make yourself available, and offer to help take things on, but don't be pushy about it. If you think that there's an opportunity for you to get your hands in there and help remove a blocker or do something, do that. But don't make the teams come in and have to hunt you down because they're busy.
Lee, you've been quiet. Anything on this one? Or do you have...
Not really. I thought you guys were great.
All right. Well, we get done early. We got oh no, 3, 2, 1, and our timer will go off. So that was our Lean Coffee session for tonight. So again, I know we mentioned it at the onset when we got started. We said this is Lean Coffee. If you want to learn more about Lean Coffee, Google it. There's lots of blog posts, and I believe Jim Benson has leancoffee.com or something. So, but a great way to have a meeting. We went through, by my count here, I think we went through 9 topics tonight. And truth in advertising, Skype gave us a few issues, so we when you guys hear this, it will have been spliced back together, so you won't even hopefully know we had some problems. But again, a fun way to have a conversation. So I guess that means it's time for everyone's favorite part of the show.
This week's hottest picks.
So who would like to get us started this week with some picks?
I'll start. So somebody may have mentioned this before, but I ran across it again and thought it was a really good demonstration of a company that has built their entire model off of 100% pull, right down to the point where I'm talking about Valve, by the way, the game company. And you can look at their employee handbook, and that's my pick, is the Valve employee handbook. They have a statement in there at some point which says, hey, we've heard that there are software companies that give employees a certain percentage of their time to work on anything they want. At Valve, that percentage is 100. So if you're interested in that kind of a model that really takes lean to its ultimate and agile to its ultimate degree, check it out. It's really an interesting read.
Interestingly, Lee, I'll go next. I'm real quick this week. I just have one pick, and it's because I mentioned it a few times, and we've done it a few times recently. And I know we've done it, but Conference Call in Real Life, it's a YouTube video. It's funny because it's a depiction of what we look like sometimes in real life when we're on a conference call. So check that out. It will make you laugh.
That's a funny video. I'll put a link in the show notes for sure.
So, John, what do you have?
You want me to go next, Jason? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know. I thought I was asking for volunteers, but apparently I need to push my team to work faster.
I will pull the picks card from the board and go next. I have a bunch. First, for doing lean coffee style discussions, there's an online stopwatch that I know Jason has used before, and I found it again tonight. And there's a way to customize it so you can give it different sounds, and you don't necessarily have to use the bomb blowing up sound. You can also use siren sounds and whatnot. So it's really great. You can pull it up on your computer real quick, and then have a nice stopwatch timer for your lean coffee session that you're going to have soon. And it's looking like Jason and I may be speaking at Agile Hood KC. So I'm going to pimp that out. Check them out, kc.agilehood.org. It's not until October, and the details are still in flux, but hopefully that's all going to work out.
There's an ambitious way to get invited to a conference. Let's just talk about it.
Yeah, if I say it on the internet, it must be true.
Absolutely. That's right, John.
Bringing me to my final pick, which is famous cartoon XKCD/386. 386 is the famous duty calls cartoon, and it's somebody is wrong on the internet. So had to put that one out there.
Well, I'm sure one of us was wrong tonight, so I'll go next. This is probably a repeat, because certainly when I brought up product ownership in a nutshell, it had been brought up many times. So this is another Henrik Nyberg animation from Spotify in their engineering culture. Has it been brought up before?
We'll say no.
I know.
Okay.
I know I've talked about it, but I don't believe it's been a pick.
Yeah. So there's actually a part 1 and part 2. They're about 15 minutes long each, but really interesting approach that is going on there about what they're doing at Spotify. The next one is the most recent episode of This American Life, which talks about Numi, and it's a really, really good podcast edition. So definitely take a listen to that. And I want to give a shout out to Joe Nauman for referring that to me this morning, because I listened to it today and really thought it would be helpful. The other one is, this was a last minute addition because we talked about no estimates, and back on July 11th, Ron Jeffries had a little article about no estimates that's kind of interesting about whether, is it defined terms around what does estimating really mean? Is it story estimation? Is it, is it guessing? So just defining the terms around that. So it's kind of cool.
I'd like to see him his name is escaping me now, Jason. You're good with names. Yeah. Lee bails me out. I'd like to see Woody Zool and Ron have a good debate about that on the internet.
So and Natalie, I have a gift pick for you. I have a gift pick. After what you did on the last episode where you gave me that awesome video, I want everyone out there to go check out a book called Control Shift by it's by Mike Bonifer. And the subtext on the title, it's a funny book. It's very practical. It's 50 games for 50 blanking days like today. So it's a little bit of improv, a little bit of spunky stuff. It's kind of a way to have some fun at work, but it is definitely a funny book. So that a bonus pick, but again, Natalie, what that funny thing you did last week, that made me think of that. So go check.
Are you referring to Monkey on the Car?
Yes. So
Okay.
So back at you. I'm going to get you a copy of this book because it's funny. Or you've got the Kindle Unlimited thing, so you can read it for free on your Kindle right now if you want to. Check it out. Control Shift.
Will do. Thank you.
So everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode of This Agile Life. We hope you've enjoyed our lean coffee conversation today. Send us some feedback. Connect with us on our website at www.thisagilelife.com or just ping us on Twitter, and we value your feedback and we value you listening to This Agile Life. Thanks for listening and keep living This Agile Life.
This Agile Life is brought to you by a community of Agile developers and coaches aspiring to spread the word about this groundbreaking approach to software development. Join us at thisagilelife.com/community.